Hey, it's another episode of the Talentingo podcast. And on this week, I have with me Michelle Grover. She is a fantastic person. We've been chatting before we started this recording, and I've already gotten to know her pretty well. She is actually a VP of engineering at SAP, correct? Hipmunk, is that correct?
SAP, Concur, TripIt, and Hipmunk, all one
All
company.
of it, all of it. I was not going to say the whole thing because
All of them.
that's all of it. She is a person in charge of engineering. So I wanted to start off with the podcast to thank you for being on. Super excited to talk to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So just to kind of set the stage and let everyone get to know you, I always like to start with an origin story of kind of who you are and kind of how you got to this position in life.
Great. So I am 46 years old. So I like starting with that because it explains some of the technology and things that happened that don't exist anymore. So I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in a pretty small family, myself and my little sister, and I have always been able to draw. My father could draw, my grandfather could draw, I could draw. So as a small child, I remember running up with these drawings to my dad and my grandfather and saying, "Oh, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an artist when I grow up." I also grew up in one of those very serious families that said, "Oh, absolutely, you will not be an artist. The only artists that make money are dead artists," which, sound like this poor kid. Like, well, this is very distressing. But long ago, we did not have Google. We had Encyclopedia Britannicas, which every household had for a penny.
Yes.
And we had a subscription to that. And as a kid, I kept thinking there has to be something I can do where I can draw. Like, can't just be, death and an artist. There has to be something more. So I did. I actually went legitimately through all these encyclopedias. And at age 10, I found mechanical engineering and architecture and decided I went and announced to my dad, I know what I'm going to be. I'm going to be an architect. My dad said, okay, that you can do. You can make money at that. That's fine. We'll support that. So I went to college prep high school where you actually had to select a major. And in that major, I picked mechanical engineering and architecture. And from the age of 10 through high school, I thought that's what I was going to be. I'd taken computer science courses. I'd taken BASIC, which is what existed back then. I was really good at it. I was totally done with my entire year's worth of work in 2 weeks. Just sat there and didn't tell anybody, so I didn't have to turn anything in and didn't have to work that hard in that entire class. Didn't even help anybody. Yeah. Oh well. Um, Finished that, graduated a bit early, decided to go to community college and stay home. College in Michigan was relatively expensive. I could go away, but even community college was expensive. So I decided to just stay home, go to community college. And because I graduated early and I'd taken all these advanced studies, I was really close to my associate's degree. So if you went to community college, you were close to your associates based on the courses. And then I was going to transfer to university for architecture. So during the summer, I needed money, and I decided to take a temporary job. Those things like Kelly Services, where you work for like a day doing one thing. I did that, so I was a receptionist at a bunch of places. Then I was the receptionist at a paging company. Yes, page long before phones came out. There were these pagers, and I did that for about a month. And at the same time, every month, you'd get a huge lobby full of people. Um, you'd have people come in to um, swap out their pagers. They'd be broken or something was wrong, as well as pay their bill and get new ones because new ones would release. And I'd have all these people staring at me in the lobby. So I would give them candy. That only works for so long because there's only 5 customer service people in the back. They also took phone calls and handled the lobby. So I asked someone to bring a computer in. Back in that day, 2 computers to sit up at my little tiny desk because one was for the billing system and one was the over-the-air programming system for the pagers. And I fixed pagers. I answered the phones and fixed pagers and did all of that. And at the end of my contract with them, our GM said, "You want to work for us?" And I said, "No, I want to be an architect. I don't want to do this. This is awesome." And he said, "But why wouldn't you?" No. And he said, "You know what? We'll pay for college." And I said, what is this pay for college thing? Is this a thing? And I didn't know. Like now everybody kind of knows about the federal programs where you can get reimbursement, but I'd never heard of that. And he said, you'll have to change your major. It can't be architecture, but if it's computers or computer science, back then we called it MIS, so managed information systems, then they would pay for it. So I went home, scoured both catalogs, sat them, and figured out that I could get a degree in physics. And that would cover just enough because, physics in building and structural engineering go for architecture, and enough of the overlap courses could look like a computer science course too. And I'd get it paid for, and I'd still be an architect.
Wow.
Then I got married and got a real job, and fast forward 10 years and still thought I was going to go back to school for architecture. Now doing computer science. I'm doing business basic, lots of different programming languages, Java. Decide that I'm really going to buckle down, go back for architecture. Get a really good friend whose dad is an architect. Go to their house for dinner to hang out with them and tell her dad, yes, I've always wanted to be an architect. And he looks at me and says, what do you think we do? What are you talking about? Built these amazing things. He's like, before you go back to school, shadow me. Come to my office, work with me for a couple days. I'm like, okay. So I did a week. I picked some days that I could take off in between, and sometimes nights and weekends. And this was the most boring job I had ever seen. I obviously had no idea how boring being an architect was, because, like a lot of things, when you do it in practice or you see it on TV or you do it in school, you see the fun part. Programming is like this too. But this poor man, they spent more time filling out paperwork and turning it into cities than they did. I don't think I ever saw him draw anything. And, and even when they drew something, it was like a portion of a tiny piece of a building they were fixing. And I was like, what job is this? This is awful. And he was such a nice man. And he said, listen, I like this job, but this is not what I thought it was either. And the best thing I could give you is to let you come in and say, what is it you really like? And what he finally said, he said, Michelle, stay in engineering if it's going to make the money. Build your house. Draw your house you want. Build a lovely house. Travel. Enjoy architecture. Enjoy it. Don't go working.
Wow, what a story.
So that's how I did it.
Wow. So I just love the story, but just to back up 1 second, because I think you said, I mean, first of all, I got an MIS degree as well. So most people are like, what is that these days? They're like, that's a thing. I go, that was a thing. Because either went into a CS degree, which was very theoretical in nature, and I took the courses and they wanted us to program an operating system, nachos. And I was like,
yeah.
when am I going to need to do this? But then MIS, it was a business applied. And I was like, okay, I can understand how the databases and the programming work in the context. So so I went the MIS route as well. But what's really interesting, what you mentioned, was your passion of drawing. By opening up those encyclopedias and starting to draw and falling into the idea of architecture and then mechanical engineering, that steers you down a completely different path. I think if you relive the life and you're like, I'm just going to, I don't know if you could rebel that time. I couldn't have rebelled at that time either. I'd been killed.
Yeah.
But exactly. If you would have rebelled and said, I'm going to draw anyways, that's a parallel universe. Like, this doesn't happen. We're not talking. Who knows?
Yep. It's true.
It's interesting. But what really the point what I was going to make is that how many children will make that decision? And I know, we were talking off air about, building diversity in hiring. How many children, let's say we're talking about diversity oriented hires, how many of those children make that decision versus going the other direction? And I argue, when we go to Target, and I dislike going to Target down the toy aisles with my 6-year-old, is because we go down and they're gender divided toy aisles. The Legos, I keep mentioning this on every podcast, and I feel like Target will one day ban me from the stores, but one side of the aisle is boys Legos and the other side are girl Legos. And I have my daughter at 6 has asked the question of why they're separated. And that's very uncomfortable. In your case, you could have easily taken the other path. That just blows my mind.
Yeah. And it's funny because and the reason I always tell this story, I didn't think it was that monumental a story, to be honest with you. But I realized that as you get older and you hear things, you realize people have a mindset of what an engineer is, what smart is, what insert here is. And if all they ever hear is the person. I have my best friend, who was my son's godfather, been friends for 20 years. He did the traditional path. He always knew he wanted to be an engineer, always, since he was a small child. And that was never in question. That was, so what he did is he took a little bit different path in that he learned languages, he traveled a ton. He added that to supplement the engineering so that he would have a more well-rounded exposure. So he kind of backed into his a little bit differently. And he and I talk a lot about well-rounded and how people really believe you go here, 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 and this happens. Here, 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 and this happens. And how few of us ever meet anyone who started as one thing and finished as that. It's not very realistic to assume that every engineer is a specific way, every software engineer thinks a specific way or does specific things. So it's why I always try and share, you have no idea. And I still draw. I have to remind myself to draw. Funny enough, it's every New Year I do this. New Year's resolution, at least draw this many times in the course of a day. I keep it for, just like any resolution, it works for about a month and a half, and then I completely forget all about it again and pick it back up. But yeah.
Too funny. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I didn't like being an engineer. I didn't take to it. I enjoyed chatting way too much. I enjoyed far more than I could see. When we talk about inclusion, I could see that I was automatically an outlier within the group of engineers where I wanted to get up and chat with people around the office, and it was frowned upon because they were like, why are you getting up? There's coding. Like, my manager was like, this is not what we need you to do. And that's when I was like, well, maybe I should be a business analyst or project manager, because maybe it'll lend to my skill set and I can still be happy. But it's interesting because when you talk about your story, and when I mean, we were similar ages when you were growing up and I were growing up, and how different it was versus now, the definition of what's accepted has widened, and understanding that a person who is talkative, who might not be the typical stereotypical introverted engineer, which is the old stereotype from many years ago, that it's possible. You can fuse both worlds together and it can make a very good engineer.
And I think that's what's interesting. If you look, we used to, I worked for a government agency a long time ago, and they were called the coffee cup person. Like you think they probably wrote like 2 lines of code and they walked around with a coffee cup the rest of the day. Everybody's seen the coffee cup person, right? And it was kind of frowned upon, like, oh, they don't do anything. Now, it was a government agency, so they probably didn't do anything. But that's a whole different situation. But to that end, the same thing that we talk about, I spend a lot of time talking to future engineers about how much they have to talk, how much they have to have conversations, how important it is to understand what you're building and not assume you know. And I think that, and I'm hoping that the industry changed a bit around that, where it's because you're talkative or you're going to have conversations, that we really should see that that's still an engineer. They're collaborative, they think, they process differently, but they're still engineers. You don't need them to go off and do these other things. They shouldn't be shunted towards business. What I say is, this is what you like to do, then we incorporate that in, because a lot of times that is what's missing. If you can just sit and never talk to someone, you will not build the right thing. And then to that end, if you want to, I get asked all the time, there are very few um, women vice presidents in engineering that can still code and are technical. There are very few that are Black. There are very few that are, are my age, any of these things, and are actually comfortable in the position. And so I get asked all the time, well, how do I do this like you? Or how do I, and I say, you be you. And we need to be better about defining what we think. Like I said, the thing about smart and what engineering is and what you need to do. And I sit with them and say to them, kind of like my friend's dad did for architecture. I appreciate that so much, because what I find is a lot of times you walk into a job and you have no idea. We get engineers. We love when they come in as interns, because at least they've had a real working idea of what the office is like. They realize that they maybe code 2 hours, maybe in the course of a day. The whole rest of their day is talking to team members, fixing things, broken IDs. That's life. That's the life of an actual engineer that works, not what we see on TV or not what we tell in school. And so I think I'm hoping that the industry has gotten better. And I think that we've at least stopped a little bit with the shunting people off based on personality characteristics to say this is what makes you good, this is what makes you bad, this is what makes you this role or that role, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree. And, I think even when it comes to early, going back to like my 6-year old, early, I see gravitations towards certain things already without us having. And I was talking to somebody from Splunk about this on the last podcast, and it was like, it's happening naturally. And I can see that if we're not cognizant and we're not self-aware of what's happening and we don't introduce other activities, other concepts, she will end up going down one path without us even realizing it. And then, the question comes down to, as a recruiting company, we always get, well, we need to hire for diversity. And we're like, maybe you should go to the elementary schools and get them to, give them, scientific STEM research tools and have them incorporated early, because you're asking me to do something that is not something I'm capable of changing. And I think what's interesting about that is there's a movement, and I think I was going to ask you this because I see that diversity is one of the most talked about things.
Yeah.
My view on diversity and inclusion is, I think inclusion is the first step, because that means somebody like me would have never left engineering, maybe.
Yeah.
And that would mean that bias is eliminated. You eliminate bias, diversity can grow, because diversity is the longer tail. It's going to take 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years for us to build a big enough engineering, pipeline in the system. I mean, what do you see? Like when you're talking about diversity and inclusion, I mean, obviously diversity is fun. Is the inclusion just that much more difficult to implement, and that's where the resistance sometimes is to adopt it first?
I think diversity can be, for lack of a better term, faked a lot easier than inclusiveness. So the examples I'll give is, just because you look different doesn't mean you're different. I think I read an article not too long ago that said that Google hires their diverse engineers are still Googlers. Like they hire a particular type of engineer, they just look a little different, and that stems as diversity. But do they think different? Are they truly inclusive? The examples I'll give are a couple examples of those, especially because I spend an immense amount of time talking to young women in various parts of their careers. Trying to keep them in technology is actually very difficult. Trying to steer them and, in being able to be an engineer and not always being, I don't understand this whole thing of send them off to the front end. I actually think that's probably what would have happened to me as an artist, is you would get, okay, you're a girl, go do front end.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do front end to save my life. I'm a back end engineer. I hate front end. I will do it if I have to. It's just not the thing. And I can draw, and I still have no desire that does nothing for me. I don't think that's cute. I can just draw something, if I want to draw. But you see a lot of that, and I spend a lot of. It's actually a little disheartening, but at least it's something it's something I can do something about. I wrote a few Medium articles about this, which is young women coming and saying, "Can you help me learn how to mature?" I'm like, okay, so you're 30. We're not talking about a 19-year-old. What does that mean? I start, instead of like just diving in, like, what are you saying? What are you asking me? And what it meant was, I'm being told that I'm too loud, bubbly, happy. I legitimately, these are the words. And these were three separate people at various times that came to me and said, I need to be more serious, disciplined, this. And I said, who is telling you this? My peers. This is what they believe an engineer is. I'm like, they're wrong. I have two women that liked makeup stopped wearing makeup because they felt like they needed to go to superhero t-shirts. And let me be clear, like, I like superheroes. I can draw. I love comics. I have Wonder Woman stuff all over my house, which you cannot see. I have Wonder Woman stuff all in my office. I like those things because I like them. I don't care if anybody else likes them. But I will also put on a really nice dress and go out and put on makeup and shoes. And I dare anyone to tell me I'm any less of anything because of that. And here we have people who they feel good about how they look, or they do this, and they're being questioned. So I put something out for I have about 300 engineers worldwide. And I asked my leadership, and then even my ICs when we meet, I said, stop. When you say things, think about what you say. There are times when I see guys coming in, I'm like, oh, you look really nice. I mean, they look really nice. Like, I don't think there's something wrong with them, and that's fine. Sometimes when you say that, because you may hit a nerve with somebody else because they've been told that they need to change, and that's why I say inclusiveness is much harder because diversity on the surface works. If you just say, well, that engineer is black, this, that, the other, visually you can have a crowd of people who look like a Benetton ad who are exactly the same people. But when you're inclusive, you pick people from different upbringings, different lifestyles, different organizations. You don't just look at them and put them into a box based on what you're looking at. And so I actually think, and I've always said that inclusiveness is much harder. And until you do that and make it okay for an engineer to be this or whatever field it is, for that person to be this, regardless, and then really value what they bring. All of my engineering directors and senior managers, sadly, they're all men. It's just the way of life here, but they're all different for me. I have an intention to hire someone who will is so different from me on purpose because I have blind spots, and I know I have blind spots. I also love them because they will call me on BS. They know, like, I will throw stuff. I am busy. I can multitask. I'm better at this than they are. And they will, hey, Michelle, wait. I know that you're going to go off and do 15 things, but I'm going to need you to sit down for a minute and actually talk to me about this. Got it. Didn't realize I just threw those 5 bullet points that you would so kind. And I love that, right? Because they will say that, or I'll send them something and tell them to do it. It's done completely different than I would have done it, and it's done better because of that. And that is inclusive. And they're all different things. They have an underlying thing. We all have to be very conscientious about our teams, the people. We have to understand technology. We have to have that. And they have to be kind and they have to be volunteers. I foster volunteering in our org. You volunteer at schools or bring people in. We support all of that. I will pay for that. I will go and speak at schools. I sit on the boards of not for profits. I support them sitting on some of these boards and bring in people. So I have a baseline of what they need to be, but then everything else is just gravy on top for me.
Interesting. Yeah, I've now interviewed multiple guests that use the word either intentional when they talk about inclusivity, and I think that is I don't know if enough of that word is being used when it's talking about inclusion, because I think it's without the intent, like you just described. That and I make the reference when people say, "What's the best thing you did?" I said, "I married my wife," because she sees the exact areas that I have blind spots to, and that's what makes me a more functional human, is that she has eyes for what I miss. And I think having that, not the diversity, but those different viewpoints in the workplace, that allows you to see things at angles. I mean, we can only see so much, and I think different viewpoints, different experiences. And I think what you mentioned, some of the bias that people have naturally towards what an engineer is. The one thing that I see as a recruiting agency owner that bothers me is people see engineering managers. I'm sure on your team, you guys see resumes. People see a resume, they scan it for 10 seconds. And unbeknownst to them, they have affinity bias and other forms of bias as they're scanning for what they want to see that fits the mold of what they think is ideal. And I hate the word the perfect candidate, the ideal candidate, because that automatically means there's a bias towards one type of person.
Yeah. Yeah.
How that gets eliminated? I know we mentioned AI is going to save us from that bias. I'm not smart enough to know the future of what somebody might be in a garage building the right app. Who knows?
Yeah.
But eliminating that bias from a manager's eyes, even if you have AI to help normalize that, they're still going to see that person, that resume. They're still going to use their bias. I mean, it's going to come in.
That's right. And and even for us, we worry about this because even before you get to us, you have to go through talent acquisition. And let's be honest, your talent acquisition is hiring a bunch of different roles. They're not engineers. They sat with you, they had a 10 or 15, 20-minute interview. Now, someone that's worked with you for a longer time has a better, it's like AI, they learn, right? They learn what you're looking for, what you like, what you're looking for characteristics, and they can actually parse through a resume and read between the lines and give you a candidate. That's not the majority of people. That's a skill set that's really hard to find too a lot of times, even just in agencies, right? And so what we've been that we've been very intentional. We have made sure that even if they don't fit everything we've asked for, what have they said they've done? Instead of do you have 10 years of Java? Do you have 10 years of object oriented experience? What kind of, do you know what it is? What kind of things? What did you do for that project? Did you just do this one thing? Reading between the lines, because I got to tell you, the vast majority of resumes are awful. If you go look at my resumes, even mine have bias towards what I think the person is looking for too. So I am trying to figure out what this unknown person, based on a job description that is also vague, is looking for. And I'm trying to figure out how to match up. And so I tell my engineering team that when you're looking at someone, you're not looking at somebody. I hate this. I want somebody I can go have a beer with. No, those are called friends. That has nothing to do with work. Like what you want, because if you can have a beer with them, but they can't code, is that really that valuable at the end of the day? That's silly. But if you're looking for somebody that is going to look at things differently, understand things differently, bring something else to the role, and heck, is just excited to be here. Let us not discount how lovely it is to have this person that's new. We hire people from boot camps. We hire women returning into the workforce. Because guess what? They ran a house and a kid. They could run an engineering team pretty damn well that I've seen. These things all lend themselves to being good at jobs. And if you're looking in that, if you're very intentional, reading between the lines and then asking questions. And a lot of times resumes we would just completely throw out of hand. We just talk to them. We'll tell TA we still want to have a 10-minute conversation with them. Let's have everybody do a screen. And we'll have different types of people screen the same person. And we keep it really short, like a 10 or 15-minute screen, because then they pick up different things. And a lot of times they'll pick up some commonality from different angles. And you'll be like, oh, that person probably wouldn't even have made it through a screen. So it's hard to do this. But looking through that, what's funny is the ones that we don't talk to are the perfect resumes. The perfect resume that matches everything we ask, we think there's something very wrong with that resume. We think that's somebody either leaning in towards telling us something, or they've made up a whole bunch of stuff that they cut and pasted, which actually happens on a resume, and they cannot even speak to the things they have put on their resumes. We have seen this happen more times than a few in all these years that I've done this. So being intentional really is part of it. Looking for things. I get the names and the anonymizing and removing the goofy language like ninjas and all this goofy stuff that shouldn't have been in a job description anyway, or all that. I agree. But next year, 10 years from now, there'll be something new and stupid that we put in job descriptions, and AI won't know it yet because it won't have learned it yet. And maybe we just have to have different people do it. And then one other thing I'll say about that is I've had my several of my directors have been immensely intentional, which is uncomfortable for their engineering orgs, where they've walked in their room and they realize, like, we're hiring, we want more women. We've got not one woman on the panel. We've got not one woman sitting in this engineering room. And they're like, why? And that's a very uncomfortable. And if you looked at this room, the room would look mostly diverse. If you look at them, these are not all white guys or whatever. This is a relatively diverse team, not a woman among them, and every guy is pretty much the same type of person, even though they look diverse. They behave very similar.
Yeah, I think what's amazing about that is, when you have the illusion of diversity, then anyone still coming in has to be assimilated, and you feel like you solved the problem, but they're going to come in and, like you mentioned, how do I become more mature? Change the T-shirt, and it's unfortunate because you want to be you and still be assimilated to the group. That's true inclusion. And I think when we hear, I hear a lot of candidates being rejected culturally, they weren't a fit, and I want to jump through across the phone and go, explain to me what culture you have that somebody doesn't fit, because that concerns me. That's my pet peeve when I hear it's not a cultural fit, and I'm like, I wasn't born yesterday. I'm reading between the lines. What you're telling me what you want and who you want, there's a distinct difference now. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And that really does bother me a lot.
And I hate the culture thing anyway, because, and though I do agree, not every job is the right job for a candidate. Even if they can do the job, I always say this, it's always fair for both sides. You as a candidate are interviewing us. We may not be what you're looking for. We may not be at the right point in your career for you. We may not be able to support you in what you may need to grow. That's okay. You may want, like there is a time in your life where you want, the big stock grants, and I mean, like I've been there and done that and got the paper that never turned into anything, so I'm pretty okay at this point. But I understand when I was younger, I thought that was great. Like, yeah, I'll work and I'd work all day and night, and I could do that, and I actually enjoyed it. Like that was actually fun. But I'm at a point in my life where that's not what I want to do anymore. And so when we talk to candidates, we're also very intentional about, are we the right place for you? Can we support you in what you want to do? If we can give you 2 years, then I'm totally fine. But if you don't see that and you really do want to go off and kind of make your way in startup land, go for it. I think that's absolutely fine. We, harbor no ill will, but we both get to, this is a relationship. We're trying to see if you fit us, but you should see if we fit you too. If you have and this thing about culture is, what kind of culture are you inviting people into? Are they comfortable? Can they be themselves? Are they criticized for being themselves? Are they really collaborative, not the made up collaborative? Do you expect them to speak? I said all engineers can argue. There's about 35 different ways to code anything, all of them wrong. It doesn't really matter. In the end of the thing, you realize this. But can you speak respectfully to somebody else? And then can you shut up and hear them? And truly hear them, not fake hear them, hear what might be a better idea and why you might not be right. That's the kind of person we want in our organization. If you sit in an interview and all we hear is all the stuff you did and you want to talk over someone, you probably aren't a fit for us.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think everything you said. We hire recruiters, and we go through very similar. I actually tell them, I want you to challenge me. Yeah, I own the company. That's fine, but I expect you. If you see something, bring to challenge me. That's the only way I learn. So that's for me is like feedback. I can't improve in any way, shape, or form without somebody telling me that there's a better way, and me being open minded to that way and running with it, because that's AI, right? Right now we're the best example of AI that exists. We're trying to create AI. We are AI, and I think
just pay us now. See, I feel like that should happen.
There you go. let me ask you this, because I'm really curious from your standpoint. You mentioned you have a talent in house that works. You work with external recruiters, I'm sure. If you could fix one thing, and it probably is more than one thing, and you mentioned in between the lines, like I'm an engineer, so I can't cover all engineering because I've never touched DevOps. Like I never coded Java, so I have limitations. I can conceptually understand a lot, but what is it? I mean, obviously, we're not going to teach every recruiter engineering, where they're not going to become code. But what's the gap? Like, what do you see? Like, what would you wish that more recruiters had, or internal, external, that would allow them to help you with just improve candidate accuracy, et cetera, whatever?
I think every recruiter, and we did this for a little while, every recruiter, TA, in-house or external, should have to come sit with your team for a month. Come to your meetings. They don't have to do anything. Sit in your ceremonies. Just stand as like an active, like doing it. I used to say this. I want you to come and write an expose article on us. Watch. See what we don't see. Here's all our ceremonies. How many of these can you come to? Get to know what this, and every team is different. I got 300 teams worldwide. So every team culture, every culture is different. What people look for, what looks different in Prague than it does. My favorite thing is like in Prague, I even had a reminder. We talk about D&I over there, and I had somebody on my team go, "We don't understand this. We see these emails. We have no idea what you're talking about. We're very diverse." Like, okay. Now, on the face, they don't look particularly diverse, but guess what? They were right. We have Czechs, Poles, Sweden. They speak a million different languages. Did not grow up there. And as she said it, I thought, and there's my bias. You are very correct.
Wow, interesting.
All I did was look around, but you're right. No one in this group is from the same place, no matter what I see with my eyes, right? Like, and when I said that, and she said, "Oh, well," and I said, "Well, the U.S. is a little different," and I talked a bit, and then it made sense to her, right? But that, like, if I didn't sit that, I wouldn't know, right? If I didn't engage in that, I wouldn't know. That's the same for recruiting or TA. Sitting with not just the manager, because it's always sit with the manager. That's cute and all. Sit with the team, watch their ceremonies, watch how they interact. When we go out, we do like, little team stuff, lunch, or sometimes they go do offsite things for, just kind of camaraderie type things or month of service and that kind of stuff. Invite somebody with you. Now, it's always harder with external people. I have to get them to sign like 8,000 NDAs or something before you can actually. But that is, if you can give them enough time to just sit with the team and observe, and then come back to the leaders and ask questions or say, hey, I'd love to sit with that person. What was that interaction about? A lot of times they're really good at, if they're really good at the job, they're really good at telling you what you might need and you don't know you need too.
Interesting. I was on a podcast for business analysts, and the guy said, "How is it that you got into recruiting?" I go, "I am a business analyst as a recruiter. I need to understand the business process I'm re-engineering. I understand scope, stakeholders. I need to dive in and dig into requirements, and it's no different because I treat the job order as a distinct project, and it has its own characteristics, the team, the state, all those things. And I think what you just defined was exactly what I actually had mentioned to this host, because I think that's where too many times the surface level is viewed, and then it's the rest of the iceberg that we're missing, and that's where hiring managers get frustrated because on paper they look good, they don't fit because they don't understand the dynamics of the team. You don't want storming and norming conforming with every hire. That's insane. So I think Actually, I think what you mentioned of sitting with the team, I think that would be an amazing. I don't know how many organizations do that, but I think that'd be phenomenal.
It's hard. It was really hard to get approved. We now have an approved list, so it's a little bit easier. And then TA, your recruiting staff changes a lot. I know for us, because SAP is a 100,000 person company, and we're a little tiny office in San Francisco. They rotate folks out and in, or you have contractors, and so it's a little harder to do that. But we do try to have them sit with the team members. My other favorite part of that is, the hiring managers don't always understand their teams really well, and let's be really honest about that, right? Like, you're the hiring manager, but how often do you sit with your teams? How many of their ceremonies do you go to? And except, you usually are pretty busy and people are coming to you, so you're getting very segmented conversations and points or discussion points, right? Having somebody else be that other eye for you, knowing that you might not even be sure of what you need, is actually a really, really good thing.
Interesting. Hmm. Yeah, that's actually when you said that, I'm thinking to a lot of hiring managers we talk to that there's a disconnect between the lead telling us something and the actual manager, and we're like, should we set up a lunch for you two? You guys should probably chat.
Should you talk? Do you work with each other?
That's too
Yep.
funny. I love it. I'm cognizant of our time. I want to make sure we get through everything. I literally I looked at the time and I'm like, it's just flown by. Like I thought we've been just chatting for 10 minutes. I think we could do this all day, but I know you got stuff to do. So I mentioned that I like asking a few particular questions. One of them is the advice you'd give to a younger you, or advice to somebody starting out. It doesn't have to be a younger you. Just you wish somebody who would have told you this starting your career or just during your career. Like, what do you think?
So I stopped the younger you question because what I realized is the younger me wouldn't have listened to anything anyway, so it really would have been a waste of time. So let's be realistic about that. However, the advice, and this is what I always say whenever I go to schools or I'm talking to people I mentor or sponsor or even sitting on board, you matter and you belong wherever you think you belong. And that is such a small thing, But that is such an important thing because I don't care who we are, I don't care how good I am, I don't care how much I rise. Sometimes I have to remind myself that I belong in the room I'm in. If I'm there, I belong there. I got there, I've been there. And I tell kids this a lot because you will always feel like you're a kid and your parents are going to have stuff, and your parents are going to have your best interests at heart. My parents did. My dad knew nothing about software. He actually told me this was the stupidest job he ever heard of in his entire life. When I was sitting at home doing COBOL with the gray bar and looking for a period missing from, my dad said, "What stupid job requires this? You are never going to make any money. Never. This is and I in the middle of the night because we had the VAC systems. No one had home PCs, so that wasn't a thing. So here I am trekking out in the middle of the night to get in line on my account on the VAC system to get my 10 or 15 minutes before it expires. And my dad's like, "This is the craziest and most ridiculous career I've ever heard of." And then when you started to be able to work from home, he's like, "Wait, wait, wait. So you can be at home and work. What kind of job is this?" And then he retired and later on. He's like, "Yep, I was wrong." Okay, totally get it. As a matter of fact, he's retired and he's constantly saying to me, "I feel like you need to hire more diverse people, like older people, that you need to pay them like the serious salaries for us just to be there, maybe get coffee and coach you on things." I'm like, I don't think we need that anymore. Thank you, though.
I swear, I literally feel that our fathers probably met
They
at
were
the
like,
same group. Yeah, they met at the same group. They chatted. They exchanged notes. I literally feel it's the same.
I'm pretty sure they're probably the same age. It's just the genre and era kind of thing. And I mean, and they're lovely people. Because my dad is the best. When he knew that I wanted to do mechanical engineering, he knew nothing about it. He found people. He was just one of these people would talk to people and go, "This is the person for you. Sign me up for these courses." I don't even know how he found some of these courses and spent my Saturdays. And he was like, if I don't know how to do it, I will find somebody else to help you do that, right? And that's the thing that I remember. And he always said to me, "You belong. I don't care where you walk in." He loved having girls. He was not one of these people that thought, I went and ran track with him. We played basketball. I dressed up and went to father daughter dances. We did everything. And he was just proud to have us, right? And said, "You are smart enough and you come from very smart people. Always be proud." And so that's why I try to tell, people who are you're going to always get discouraged. Some people do have imposter syndrome, some don't. But you will always hit a point where something will hit you and you think, "Where am I? Am I supposed to be here?" You can always say to yourself with a little pep talk, "No, I belong here. I belong here. It's okay."
Amazing. No, I love it. I especially love that he found courses because I remember I for some reason when I don't know how old I was a teenager. I loved the idea of becoming a commodity trader. I didn't know what. I don't know if it was just I don't know if I was enamored with the idea, the money. So I go, I really think this is interesting. And he actually found a family friend of a friend who was a commodity trader, and he sent me to him for a couple of days. And I came back and I said, "Dude, this is like they're just literally watching bars on charts, and they're like, I'm like, this seemed." We just sit there for 8 hours and we're just watching a screen. He was running numbers and calculations, and I was like, I don't know how much money they get paid, but I can't. I don't care what it is. I can't do this job.
This is not worth it. And isn't that beautiful? Like what a life to have parents. There was no internet. Like they literally had to get on the phone and call. They didn't even know what they were asking for. Okay, let's be super clear. My dad would say, "What's that thing you like?" He'd be on the phone and I'm like, what? And the really poor description, and like, "You mean like mechanical drawing?" That okay. So yeah, she's looking for it. I'm like, "What is happening?" And somehow he would find someone that knew someone. Seriously, I was signed up for more courses through Ford. He got us. We lived in Detroit. We're outside of Detroit. I had courses at Ford with senior executives. I don't even know how he found them. He just kept on until he found somebody.
What a great dad. That's amazing. I love it. I love it. And you know what? You carry through, you belong. So he did something right. So good for him, actually. Amazing. I love it. Um, The other question, you've managed extensive amount of teams. I don't know how you keep your day. I don't know. I'm curious for myself. I mentioned I love productivity hacks or just how people find a way to stay efficient. What's your secret? What's your tip of what makes you click?
I'm really bad at it. Going to just be, I know that I love it because I read other people's hacks. I was like, yeah, I try that for like 10 minutes. That stuff go away. I won't keep it up. It's just not how it works. So what I've learned is a couple things. One, I have actual my EA does this too, by the way, and my previous EA. I have blocks of time that are my time in my calendar. And what I used to have is blocks of time that were supposed to be for productivity. And I realized that was a horrible idea because once I would get on, productivity when you're the VP of engineering for a team all around the world is as a software. As a software engineer, productivity looks very different. For me, my job is to put out fires and emergencies coming at me at all times. So having this block that's supposed to be a productivity time is usually a misnomer. But blocking that time and saying I am unavailable for anyone except for me is a much better thing. I do whatever I want. I'll go take a walk. Sometimes I'll go sit down the street and I always have a book on me or I have physical books. And my husband was just laughing. He's like, this book's here. Why do you have three books in the car? Because I never know if I'm going to have one on a Kindle or not. And so I always have a book physically because maybe I'm going to pull off the side of the road and give myself a half hour to read. But giving myself time back in the course of a day is extremely important. And it also reminds me, it's kind of a reminder that I can't do everything. So the other reason I honestly don't do a huge amount of productivity hacks is as a leader, I've learned there are excuses for me not to delegate things that I need to give to my team.
Nice.
There's something in your ego that says, I don't care who you are. I don't care how much you appreciate your team. You do a couple things. One is for them, you think, I don't want to give them this. They've got enough stuff going on. That's one side of it. The other side is, they're not going to do this the way I would expect it. Let me do it. By always having to give something away, it is a way of keeping myself honest. And they will call me. They will actually say, what is it that you are working on and why can't you give me that? To the point that I actually have one that said, I know that you're supposed to be opening this rec and it's still not open. And it's 3 weeks later. Can I open it? Like, well, it's not for you. Yeah, but it's for you, and we all think you need it. And went, got the job description, filled it out, put it out, sent it out to the rest of the team, posted it, we switched it over to me later. Those are the things. So I joke about the productivity hack, but I've realized that I function weirdly anyway. I have teams that are around the world, so I'm always going to be up at some ungodly time in the morning and on really late at night. So just carving out that time and then letting it be okay to say I can't do all these things and having somebody reach in to help me when I'm not able to delegate is probably the best thing I could do for myself.
Nice. I mean, I think that those are two things that are amazing because actually, I think delegation is where most people retain too much. And what you just said, not knowing and having somebody to watch your back, I think those are phenomenal. So I love it. You probably were up. I remember we exchanged tweets. I mean, you were in a different country. Like you probably do literally have your passports all full and your time and your biological clock is.
Yep. It's
awesome.
True.
Awesome. I love our chat. I think the chat was awesome. I think we could have chatted about whatever because I just think you're fantastic and I appreciate you doing this. We'll get this posted out. Are you okay if we include your LinkedIn if somebody wants to reach out and kind of follow up with you?
Yeah, you're totally welcome to.
Okay, awesome. And again, thank you very much. And everyone who hopefully has listened to this, enjoyed it, please leave a review. Let us know how we're doing. If we have any questions that we can ask other guests, always want to know. Appreciate it. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.